Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. All glory, all praise, and all thanks belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only. My today's talk is intended to be the last one in the series of Parental Care. All my talks are based on my book of 30 chapters, namely Simple Child Psychology. The book shows, advises and guides parents how to apply elements of psychology to prepare the child mentally fully for challenges ahead in life. Mind reigns supreme. In human life, mind calls the shots. Imam Ali alayhi salam said that mind is more wonderful in creation than human beings himself. Today, I would like to speak on what is in chapter 10 of my book. The chapter 10 is a lamentation how parents let the child remain with the loss and lack of the culture of reading in his entire life. Now, it may seem to some that this is a small child issue or this is a small parental issue. But no, the consequences and the ramifications are very serious to the extent that the very control of one's mind can be weakened through external influences. And another thing is that the consequences and ramifications are subtle, remain unrecognized in the entire life, and therefore these consequences and ramifications remain stuck in the entire life of the child when he is adult and until death. It is perhaps the parents themselves may have lost the culture of reading, and the child is observant in the behavior and finds that there is no culture of reading in the family. Now, information and news are necessity in human life. We shall find that we cannot remain without news or information about what is happening around us, what is happening in the country, or indeed what is happening around the world. Because the reality of this life is a struggle in life. The whole life is a span of struggle. And in order to be well equipped with the struggle, it is essential for us as human beings to be equipped with the daily news, information, and other happenings around us and in the country. So, for that purpose, we need the sources. And the sources are the print media and the voice media or electronic media. These are the sources. We cannot do without making use of these sources. But often we find of the two sources, the most convenient one is the electronic media. It is the voice media, or we can say television. It's very convenient in life. We can be at home, just switch on whatever channel we want. We get the news, we get pieces of information. What is additionally more, we see pictures also on the screen. And as a result, we become addicted to television and rightly so. With the constant use of television and other electronic devices for the necessity of the news and for information, we form a habit to rely on the television, and as a result, there is a trust and dependence built on television. And what's more, when we listen to the news, we hear human voice, and that makes us feel friendly to television. When we read the book, there's no voice. But now, having spoken about the conveniences, let me now speak about the disadvantages, about the serious negative results by relying more always on television, with the exclusion of keeping with the culture of reading. In the television, like the mind has a pattern. The mind receives news, receives information, processes it, and then retains it. And when the time comes, applies the pieces of news. In order to do that, the mind, upon listening to television, the mind becomes anxious about what is next coming in the news, and then what is another next, and so on. Now, because of that concentration of what is coming next and next, the sharpness of scrutiny, the sharpness of critical thinking become diminished, because we cannot control the speed and the pace in which the news are delivered. The information is delivered. It is in the hands of the presenters of the news. So we lose the sharpness of the scrutiny of the mind as to what is believable, to what extent, and what is unbelievable, to what extent. In contrast, when we do the reading, we have control in the speed and the pace in which we try to grasp and digest what we read in a leisurely pace. With that advantage, the critical thinking also becomes sharp, because we can even reread any passage if we find that we can't understand, and we say, all right, let me read again the passage. Or even we can pause momentarily and think, what does the author want to say? Now that leaves us in the control of our mind, how to believe, what to believe, and to what extent. This is only available when we do the reading, and therefore mostly the reading culture has a greater advantage over the voice media culture. The result is that, having become habituated with the trust and dependence on television, having had our guard down now because of the trust that we have on the television, that is a saying that familiarity breeds consent. Once we are so much familiar with the television as a source of ideas, information, and news, then our guard is down, and that is the time the values, the criteria, or the yardstick are introduced into our mind. They are impacted into our mind without our knowing, and then we use the same values then, subconsciously, criteria, the same yardstick, even if it is 30 inches, in order to formulate our own opinion, which we think our personal opinion, to make decisions which we think is our own decisions, not knowing that the values and the criteria applied never belong to us. They were imposed upon us. The worst thing for a human being to suffer is to have the mind duped, cheated, the mind controlled, and without knowing that this is so. Now let me give you an example, the difference to the mind. When a piece of news, when a piece of information is listened to, and when it is read directly, how the mind reacts. Let me give you an example of a migrant laborer from a village having gone to a far city for a labor work. He receives a letter from the village, from his family, like he does perhaps regularly. What does he do? He is illiterate. So he takes the letter to somebody to read it out to him. And after the letter having been read out to him, he folds it and goes to another person and gets the same letter read out again. Now that is wisdom. The mind dictates that is wisdom. I'll explain why. When the letter was being read out for the first time, he was anxious about the news. What is the news? Bad or good? What is next? And what is next? And what is next? His entire mind was focused on what is next and what is next through anxiety and apprehension. But that's not enough. So he then takes the letter to another person, now having known the whole picture. Now his mind now can visualize in a wider picture all that is written in the letter. So the child was sick. He can visualize the child in his cot, perhaps distressed because he was sick. And then the news was that the close neighbor died. So now the mind scrutinized in the wider picture. The poor fellow, he was not even old. And how can the family now fend for itself, for livelihood? This is the reality of the mind. Wants to repeat. Television would never repeat to you again. Once implanted, gone. So the result, having become habituated to trusting what is we listen to more than we read. The questionable beliefs are planted in our mind in the name of religion. Political agenda are paraded in our mind in the name of good governance. Commercial adverts are bombarded upon our mind and we accept them in the name of consumerism. The mind, having lost the culture of grasping, absorbing what is read out, the mind having accepted as a pattern of accepting things with little sharpness in the critical thinking, the result is docility. The result is to be gullible, accept what is said, trust what is heard. The result is servitude, saying yes to whatever that's being told to us. This becomes the pattern of the mind. In fact, Islam condemns this. There are more than 400 verses in the Quran which summon our critical thinking. And to the extent such a person who doesn't have the sharpness of the mind in critical thinking is compared to cattle. Kal an'am balhum adal. In the mission of Islam, the first word that was revealed was Iqra, read. It is in the Surah Alaq. This is now the last talk in the series of parental care. Let me make a conclusion, and in conclusion, I would like to point out the reality of this life in this world. The pure reality, the naked reality, the stubborn as it may be. I'll be brief to be precise. This human life is a life of competition and struggle. Competition over one another and struggle against one another. This is the reality of this life. And the struggle is in the purpose for which we have been created. And that is the reason we have come across one ayat, وَلَيْسَ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. And there is nothing for insan except what he strives for. Struggle, compete. I think it is in Surah Najm, this verse. The competition and the struggle become even worse, knowing that our natural world resources get depleted because of the abuse by mankind of the natural pattern of renewable pattern of natural resources. To make it even worse, the human population becomes increasing and increasing at the explosive rate. And thirdly, the reason for the obligation of the parents to weaponize the mind of the child with a tool which is sharpened only in childhood against newer and newer challenges that keep arising as one generation succeeds another. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.